Welcome back to another video on SST. In the last video, we just deployed a pretty simple static website, but in this video, we're going to create an API and play around with API Gateway and Lambda and talk about my favorite feature of SST, which is Live Lambda. And if you have not heard of Live Lambda is amazing. Live Lambda is the reason why I think SST is such a game changer and is such an improvement over existing frameworks that help you with deploying infrastructure to AWS. And I've done a lot of work with serverless framework, as well as just plain CloudFormation and the AWS CDK. And I've played around with Terraform, and I've done a fair amount with AWS Amplify, just working on some of my own personal projects in the past. And I have to say, by far, Serverless Stack, or just SST, has been the best framework that I've used for deploying stuff to AWS, hands down. And like I've said, a huge reason for that is because of Live Lambda. And if you've never worked inside AWS and you haven't done a lot with Lambdas in general, then this probably won't be that exciting to you. But if you have done extensive stuff in AWS with Lambda, then I think this is something that you're going to be really interested in. So the best way that I can think of to explain what Live Lambda is basically instant hot reloading of your Lambda functions. So to demonstrate that, we're going to come over here to our stacks folder and we're going to make a new stack. I'm going to call it just API stack. I'm going to grab some imports from right here, and we're just going to export a function. And this function is going to take a stack, and that's going to be of type stack context. And then inside here, we're going to create a new API. And this is just an API construct that comes from this SST constructs library. And in here, it's going to take the stack, and then we'll just call it API. And then right here, it's going to take some options. So inside here, we're going to add routes. And then right here, I'm going to say a get slash. And then the value to that is going to be packages, functions, source, and lambda.handler. So what this is doing is this is the HTTP method, and then this is the route, just this forward slash. And then inside here, this is going to be the file path to the code for the Lambda, which you can see right over here in the file explorer. And then I guess I have to name this, so we'll call it API stack. And then we're also going to say stack.add outputs. Yep, there we go. And then we're going to call this URL, and this is going to be api.url. And this will add this output so that we know what URL to hit for our new API. So when I save that, nothing should happen because I have not added it to our sst.config. So I'll just import that really quick. This is going to be API stack. And then down here, we'll do app.stack and pass in the API stack. And then that should start deploying, and it does right away. And while that is deploying, let's take a look at our Lambda function. So this file kind of has a boring name. It's just called Lambda, pretty generic. But inside of here, we have a pretty typical looking Lambda function where you have some kind of handler. Oh, and also I guess this function name right here, handler, needs to match up with this guy over here. So we could change this to like main and then come over here. And also we'd have to change this to main. But if I change this to handler, and save that. It says it doesn't have any problems, but if I hit this route, then it would probably fail. In fact, why don't we just check that and see what happens? So down here, we see that this is the URL. I've already copied and pasted that and put it inside an environment here in Postman. But if I come over here to this get route right here and just hit that route, then right here, you can see that we have an internal server error. And down here, we see that we have this nice little error that says that function handler is not found. So if I come back over here and I change this back to handler and then save, then you can see that it instantly builds and doesn't even have to deploy anything. It just builds and it's ready to go. So if I tab back over here to Postman and hit this route again, then there you go. You can see that it works immediately. Although this output is kind of weird. It's not what you would normally expect. When I was playing around with this, getting ready for this video, I thought at first that it might have been the headers, but if we look at the headers right here, we can see that content type is application JSON. So that's not the problem. And it's just this weird thing where if you add status code, then it seems to work. So come back over to Postman and hit that, and There you go. And we can see that the response right here is exactly what we would expect from looking at the code right here. And also, did you notice that the changes that I made were pretty much instantaneous? And when I say pretty much, there is a delay of about, it looks like 74 milliseconds here and 67 milliseconds here, but it's really fast. And this is so nice because you don't have to make your changes and then push it up into the cloud, wait for a deployment, and then test your change out. See that you screwed something up, so you have to go back, make the change, and redeploy it. And like, I got so sick of going through that workflow over and over and over. And this is such a breath of fresh air. And just to show this live Lambda in action as like clearly as possible, I'm gonna make a change right here. We'll say json.stringify, and we'll just say hello and world, and then I'm gonna hit save and immediately come over here to Postman, which I need to make a little smaller. There we go. And you'll see that the changes that I make to this handler function take effect immediately. So here we go. I'm gonna save it and come over here and hit send, and there you go. Although that is not what I would call pretty. I bet I need to add a header in here. So we'll add that content type header in here and save that. Come over here and hit send, and it looks a lot better. So if you don't think that's cool, then, well, I guess you're a human and you're allowed to your own opinions, but I think that this is just so cool. So just for the heck of it, let's make another route. So I'll make another file. I'm just gonna call this post.ts because I'm gonna use this for post requests. And I'm just gonna copy this code right here and put it in here. So this guy right here, this is just an event. And if I hover over it, then you can see that the type of the event is an API Gateway Proxy Event 2. And so there's really nothing special going on here as far as what SST is doing. There is this API handler function, and this API handler is just a wrapper around your own function, and it's just a higher order function. And there is some really cool things that you can do with that. And I haven't really seen this in the docs, but there's this thing called the context API that was introduced in Serverless v2, and it kind of lets you do things in a similar way to how hooks work with React. And it's a really cool feature, but I'm gonna save that for another video. But for now, you can know that this API handler function really doesn't do a whole lot just by itself. In fact, if I get rid of it, and then we let handler just be a normal function that's not wrapped with this API handler thing, then it still works exactly the same way. In fact, let's go add a route. So I'm gonna call this post, and just for fun, we'll say post test, sure. And then we'll wait for that to deploy. And while that's deploying, I'll come over here, and I already have a post route right here. You just add test on there. And then we'll just come back here and wait for the Lambda to finish deploying. All right, so now that that is deployed, I should be able to hit this /test route using a post request, and it should work just the same as our other route, and it does. So that says hello world, or get route, and the post route also says hello world. And because this is a post request, we can come in here and add a body. So I will also just say hello world. All right, then over here for the event, we'll just destructure body out of there, and then we'll do console.log body. And then if I come over here and hit this route, then we should see it print out, yep, hello world. And then if I change this to like foo bar and hit send, then we'll see foobar right here. And then just to make this a little more exciting, let's say that we have some kind of value that we're trying to guess that's on the back end, and we'll make some post requests with our guess to see if we can get it right. So I'll just say const guess, and we'll say it's 10. And then down here, we're gonna have to parse the body because the body is always a string. I'm actually gonna add API handler back on here just because it gives us some type safety. And now we can see that body is either a string or undefined. And then we'll say const parsed equals, say type of body equals string. And if that's true, then we'll do json.parse body. Otherwise, we'll just do an empty object. So this is of type any, and that's okay. We're just gonna leave it as type any for now, but just for demonstration purposes. So over here, I'm gonna change this to guess, and I'm gonna change bar to like 9. So the guess will be incorrect. And then right here, we'll say if parse.guess equals guess, then we'll return response and message, you are wrong. And then I'm going to add another function over here, and I'll call this response, and we'll just say this is payload, and we will return the status code 200. Headers, I guess I'll just grab those from right down here. But inside of here is going to be our payload. I'm just going to say that's any, although I just realized that it should be you are correct, not you are wrong. This is a gaslighting API. Oh, wait, but just kidding. So, but if the guess is incorrect, then we'll say message, you are wrong. Right, and then if we hit the route, we should see the message you are wrong, which is what we get. And if I change this to 10, then it should say you are correct. Great. So, but as all programmers know, we should never just hard code values like this. So something that we might want to do is grab this from an environment variable. So if we come back over here to our API stack, then we can put in this thing called defaults, and then under defaults, we can say function and then environment, and here we can pass in our environment variables. So here I'm gonna add in guess, and it has to be a string because it's an environment variable, but we'll just make that the value of 10 there. And then as soon as I save this with this new environment variable, then you can see that it kicks off another deployment. And then once that's deployed, then we should have access to that environment variable. So I'm going to change this from guess equals 10 to guess equals process.env.guess. And because it's a number, I'm just going to put this little plus sign right there. And TypeScript is going to yell at me because it could be undefined, but we know it's not going to be undefined. So we'll just go with it. And then down here, I'm going to say console.log, and we'll say guess and do process. Well, I guess we just do guess right here as well. So we should see this console.log statement where it says that guess :10. So I'll hit that route, and there we go. We can see that guess is equal to 10. So we saw that log statement. And then if I come over here, and let's just change this to like 1, 2, 3, and we'll see that that kicks off another deployment, which does tell us that when we change environment variables, that is not part of the live Lambda experience, and it does require another deployment so that those config values can be put inside the Lambda function. So we'll come back over here, and I'm not going to change anything, but we still have this console.log statement, so we should see guess is equal to 1, 2, 3. So I'll hit this route, and there we go. It says guess 1, 2, 3 down here. And you might be wondering how this environment variable is getting loaded into our local environment right here. So I just got rid of Postman there real quick. But if I come over here and, well, I guess I'll just quit out of NeoVim right there. And I could be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. I don't see how I could really be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that SST is starting up its own process and injecting environment variables into that process. So when we run the pm run dev, that spins up the process that's going on right down here. But we also saw some other things like with the Astro website. I guess I'll just go run in there real quick, and down in package.json, we saw this SST bind Astro dev thing. And SST bind was actually renamed from SST env, but it got changed to SST bind. And that's kind of an interesting command. So like, what is this doing exactly? Like I said, I think it's just wrapping whatever command comes after it inside a child process, but injecting some environment variables, and I'm sure doing some other stuff behind the scenes before it starts off this Astro dev process. And the thing is that this process that comes after SST bind can be pretty much anything from what I can see. So let me show you what I mean by that. So when SST starts up, it adds some of its own environment variables that are prefixed with SST underscore. So if I'm just here in my normal shell and I type in this command env pipe grep SST underscore, then the env command should show all of my environment variables, but then I pipe it into grep and filter out only environment variables that have this SST underscore inside of it. So if I hit that, then you'll see that I don't have any environment variables with that prefix. But if I type pm sst bind, and then I'm going to pass in something that starts a process, and I'm actually just going to go with sh. So that started up a new process. I'm inside of sh right now, and I should be able to do the exact same thing. I'll say env and then pipe to grep and sst underscore. And you can see that I have several environment variables now with that SST prefix. But I thought that was an interesting insight and kind of demystifies the whole environment variable thing a little bit for myself. And I thought that you guys might appreciate that as well. There's still a lot to talk about when it comes to SST and Lambda and all the different things that you can do with it and the features that it has. In their docs, they actually say that they want SST to be more like a framework, kind of like Django or Ruby on Rails, where it just has everything built into it and it's really easy to get up and going with it. I don't think they're quite there yet, but they're certainly headed in the right direction. And from what I've seen, the team behind SST is top notch and they're doing an excellent job. And I think we will just continue to see excellent work coming out from them. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And if you want to see more of this content, then subscribe to my channel so that you can get notified when I have more videos come out. I also do some videos on NeoVim stuff. And if that's something that interests you, then consider subscribing for that as well. And if you've made it this far in the video, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one.